platforms, but please let me know through the chat if you need anything. Your lines are going to be muted eventually, but we'll open up because it'll be very social, as it already has been as we've been kicking off here during a breakout room and in time for discussion. There'll be a chance to speak up. So we're going to record the presentation portion. So it's going to hit record on us, just so you know, but we won't record or do anything with the breakout rooms. Those are your time. Use the chat icon, like I said, submit questions there. Some of you did submit questions in advance that we'll be addressing, or we can move to part 2. But they were really, really good questions. You'll receive an email so that you can have access to the slides. And we're also hoping that you're going to take a minute to complete the survey that'll be sent. That'll help also inform our content for part 2. And that part 2 is September 17th. So please save the date. It's going to be another chance to get together even sooner. I can't believe we're all together already. And it was back in May, I think, that we were together last time. This has gone by so quickly. I also want to mention the Women's Leadership Forum LinkedIn group, and that is for CHPA members. Events like this tonight after hours are open to non-members and friends of CHPA. The LinkedIn group, however, is private for CHPA members. If you would like to be added, please use LinkedIn and we'll build that as a greater resource for everybody. My name is Beth Allgeier. I am CHPA's Senior VP of Business Development and Industry Relations. I'm very excited because I get to serve as the liaison for the CHPA Women's Leadership Forum. And I hope right now you're all very comfy and safe in your homes. Some of you are wearing masks right now, so thanks for rocking the mask. Hopefully with a beverage of choice and some slippers on as we kick off part 1 of After Hours Courageous Conversations. And Wendy, if you could go to our chair slide. I really want to thank our co-chairs, Lisa Paley and Terry Goldstein. We're grateful. Their vision is what has inspired this series to bring us together again around critical topics like this. And despite the pandemic that's keeping us physically apart, the deaths of George Floyd and so many others have propelled us to want to make change. But it can be difficult to know how to have the needed conversations that will allow us to make the progress we want to make. Personally and professionally, we want to overcome biases. We want to be able to discuss race, create inclusive communities, and become better allies of our Black and Brown friends. Consider yourself on a journey for and about you. Anti-racism begins with me and with each of you. So I want to tell you about Michelle and Wendy, our moderators today, and welcome them. Michelle Muhammad and Wendy Van Biesen. Michelle is Chief Sales and Marketing Officer at DSE Healthcare Solutions. DSE's collection of legacy health and wellness brands set them apart. Michelle and her team rejuvenate these brands and introduce them to new generations. The brand's enduring connections to the past, commitment to quality, and focus on consumer needs help fulfill solutions for today. Michelle serves on the CHPA Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee that Marcia was just speaking about, with members of the Board of Directors. And she recently chaired the CHPA Marketing Conference Virtual Education Series, which had over 400 registrants as it pivoted from a traditional in-person event this year that it had been in the past. This year was a webinar series. And she's not only an asset to DSE, but she's also a tremendous asset to CHPA in so many ways. Wendy Van Biesen is a trained leadership and executive coach with the Illuminations Group, another CHPA member. She has over 25 years of experience in marketing strategy and change management. I like to say Wendy walks the talk. I told you this last time too, as we entered the pandemic. She's a single mom and she's a 3-time cancer survivor whose positivity is absolutely contagious. And you really want to be in a quarantine bubble with Wendy. It is a very positive and encouraging space to be in. So I hope you enjoy having Wendy and Michelle with us. They're going to lead us to discover some new things about ourselves, and we're grateful that they're here with us after hours. Thank you, Michelle and Wendy, for helping us learn to be brave while being uncomfortable. And now I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Good afternoon. Thank you, Beth. I appreciate the introduction and the great words that you said about both of us. I am so excited to be here because I think that this is such a smart idea. The ladies who came up with it, Beth and Wendy, this is such a smart idea. This first series, this first part of the 2-part series we want to go through, we're going to take you through what are courageous conversations, because you know that's a topic when we're talking about race especially. on both ends of the spectrum. It absolutely is a courageous conversation. And I'm so excited that we had so many people here to actually want to engage. We built the session around questions that we got from you, as Beth mentioned. So I think it's going to be something you'll really feel is relevant. We're going to take you through some guidelines that we have for the conversation, because that's always helped to frame actually what we're going to do. We're going to spend most of the time in breakout sessions so we can have these one-on-one conversations. I think, like you guys, there have been a lot of webinars where phenomenal speakers, but you're being talked to. And then you've had sessions at work, but normally you're being talked to. This is for us to talk to each other. I love this idea. And then we're going to have a discussion, come out of those breakout rooms and see what we learned and what we talked about and how we can help each other. And then we're going to close.
So, well, thanks, Michelle. I'm so thrilled to be here, especially with Beth and Michelle as we tackle how to have courageous conversations. And when we think about that, to have a courageous conversation really means that something is at risk. So what is courage? I actually had the opportunity of being on a call yesterday with Brene Brown, who is my absolute favorite. And she was talking about some seminal research that she is just coming out with, and she's going to be writing another book. And she asked one question. She went around the world. And that one question was, what prevents great leadership? And especially in this time now during COVID and understanding the Black Lives Matter movement, understanding what's preventing great leadership is critical. Her hypothesis when she went into this research was that it was based on fear. And when we think about fear, fear is like on the opposite side of the coin of courage. It's hard to have courageous conversations when we're fearful because we don't control what the outcome is, and we don't know necessarily what the other person is going to say. However, what Brene Brown found, and it was so interesting, it wasn't really fear, it was about self-protection, that we don't have courageous conversations because we really want to protect ourselves. That is what prevents great leadership. And so we don't really want to feel uncomfortable. And so we stay in this area of discomfort. So when we think about today, and as we frame this idea of a courageous conversation and what is truly at risk, one of the opportunities that we can think about is what's the outcome that we want? What do we want to have happen? And so to help us along with this, I'm going to launch a poll, and then Michelle and I are going to go and answer some of these questions. So I'm going to share with everybody. This is Mentimeter, and if you haven't used Mentimeter in your organizations, it really is fabulous because it allows people to poll and to get answers in a very anonymous way. So if everyone has their phone available, if you go to, at the top of the screen, it says www.menti.com. And then if you put that code in, 555414, we're gonna ask you to answer this question, which is what prevents us from having these courageous conversations? From the side of strongly disagree to strongly agree. And then once you start putting your answers in, everything is going to begin to populate and we'll be able to get an average number.
Wendy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Terry.
Thank you. Can you give that to us again?
Sure. Sure. It's www.menti, MENTI.com.
Thank you.
And then the code is, you have to put a code in, 555414.
Thank you.
Oh, is it not on the screen?
No, it's not. I thought maybe it was just me.
No. Sorry.
I'm like, wow, that was quick.
I'm like, hello, not on the screen. That would be a problem. Okay. I think we had a little bit of technical difficulty last time too, if I recall.
There we go.
Is it on the screen? Oh, good. Fabulous. Great. And these aren't related to each other, by the way. They're each distinct. So just because you put a 5 or a 1 during one doesn't mean that it's going to flow to the other. Give it a few more minutes, or a few more. What's really interesting, if for those of you that, just a teaching moment, for those of you that haven't used Menti, you see like the little mountains that are coming. That means most people, like that's where people are actually putting the numbers in. So for the bottom, for instance, want to be liked, you see something smack in the middle, but you have it at either end, which means people are having differing opinions. So it's really helpful to see where people are on that continuum, because certain people might feel one way versus the other.
It's a nice way to gauge an entire group
Mm-hmm.
in aggregate. Yeah.
So did you want us to start filling this out, Wendy?
Oh, yes, please. Absolutely. Yeah, right now what we see is, you know, don't want to say the wrong thing, don't know what to say, don't want to offend, seems to be, and then want to be liked. So we'll give it just another 10, 15 seconds and then have an open conversation as to what we think this means. So when I'm looking at this, I mean, we see it distributed fairly evenly, but what really comes up based on this group of people, of women, is that we don't want to say the wrong thing and we don't want to offend. And when we think about what the outcome is, though, if we don't want to offend or we don't want to say the wrong thing, then we're not really engaging in that conversation. And then we're not really getting at why racism is, how racism shows up in our workplace. How can we actually have better conversations about that? And it's really challenging not to want to offend. But we're going to give you some tools and we're going to have some discussion as to how to actually begin these conversations so that we're having them very honestly and openly, and engaging in a way where both people can feel heard. Michelle, do you have any thoughts on this?
No, I think it was well said. I mean, I think this is what we're trying to get past. So it's good to know where we're starting at, and then we can see how far we go.
Terrific. All right, we're gonna move up. All right, can everyone see the screen now? Okay, great, terrific. So these were questions that we got from you when people started, you know, when you RSVP'd. And these were the 6 that were really, that we felt attracted the most ideas of how to have the conversation about race, as well as what we felt would be most useful. So, Michelle, do you want to start question 1, or should I start question 1? Should we do it together? How do you want to do this?
We should do it together.
Yeah,
we should do it together. Well, let me start by saying it depends, right? It depends. There's some questions I would ask you before answering this question. And one of them would be, well, I would want to know, do you have a relationship with the person you're about to start this conversation with or not? Because I think that matters, whether you have a base to start from in terms of how you approach it. Because when Wendy approached me about doing this session, of course, first of all, I took the call because I know and love Wendy. And secondly, I know how open Wendy is and I trust her. And so there should be some, you know, if you're coming from a level of some rapport, I think that's one thing. The other question I would ask is whether you're a senior to the person or at the same level to them. And if we're talking about at a workplace, because racism is about power. So if you're senior to the person, you should just recognize that fact, that that person who's having the conversation with you will try to understand where you're coming from, whether you're coming from them as a senior leadership representative, and whether their answers to your questions will impact their position at their job. So that's something just to keep in the back of your mind. I would also say, I would ask, have you done some homework on the topic? What do you know about it? You need to show, like I heard Marcia say, show your why and show your passion about the topic. So come somewhat informed. And I would say come with open-mindedness and the fact that you want to learn more and you're willing to listen, and that you are vulnerable too in this space. So those are some things I would start with.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Wendy?
Yeah, I mean, well, yes, and what I think is really helpful about this, which is coming to the table with some knowledge yourself so that you've done the homework. It's not enough for me as a white woman just to open a conversation and to look to you, Michelle, to teach me. It is something different for me to say, well, this is what I read, or this is what I think. Michelle, how does this land on you? Or what do you think about this? And I think even the way this came together was the fact of, we're thinking about doing this. I think you'd be a great partner. This is the work that I'm doing. And I think I had shared with you, there was the page that went around about how to be an anti-racist, and it had all the different books and the movies. And so you and I engaged in a great conversation about 13th, and I am not a racist, or I am not your Negro. And I think these are important topics, but, already like I'm schwitzing under the arms, these are hard to talk about. And so I think just by opening up and saying, I want to learn more, and I'm open to learn, and I'm vulnerable because I probably have not done it right. I'm here to learn it all, not know it all, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think those are good. The other thing I would say is, what is your goal in the conversation? Like, are you doing it from an HR perspective where you really are just looking to create a brave space to talk? Or do you want to hire more women of color? Like, what's your goal? Because that may impact what your conversation is about, and then what you may do with that conversation. And I think probably that's important too. You want to sort of offer what you're trying to get out of this conversation so people know how to gauge the responses.
Right. It's about understanding what that outcome is. Like, what is the outcome that we want to create?
That's right.
Which leads us, I think, into question 2, which is really, what are some reasons non-minorities don't seek out building relationship with minorities, especially at work, when there are so many incredible benefits? And I think, basically it comes down to maybe it's just not on the radar screen. Like, if it's not wanted or not needed, it's just that it just wasn't top of mind. But I think now with Black Lives Matter and what's happened and this opportunity that is created, it's now more important than ever. And so it's not enough. I was reading something, actually, I just finished the book, White Fragility. And in the book, it's not enough, of course, silence now is not the option, but it's not enough just to step back. It's like, what have we done? What are we proactively doing? And so what I'd like to think is that this will now change.
Yeah, I was just reading today, and I'm trying to remember where I saw it, but it was a really high number of people of color who said they've never had an informal conversation with a senior leader at work, an informal conversation. So that was a surprise. It was over 50%, really high number. So yeah, it doesn't have to be the first conversations about race. It just could be start building those relationships, getting to know folks.
Yep. Find out, like, how do they like their coffee? What are they interested in out of work? We all know that when you're building a high performing team, it's based on trust.
Right.
And this is about also building those teams that are synergistic together. And this is one way to do it. So question 3, what is the best first step one can take after acknowledging bias is present? Michelle, what do you think about this one?
I think you should take that one.
Ha. Ah, well said, my friends. Well said. I think what you can do, the best first step is to step back and see again where this bias is coming from. Is it a boss? Is it a peer? Is it someone that reports to you? I think it's also about getting data on what bias looks like and perhaps doing some education. And I also think it might be about talking to your boss about it and saying, this is something that's happening. Can we have a webinar? Can we do a lunch and learn? Is there a way that we can address bias in the workplace that allows everyone to grow and learn from the experience?
Those are great suggestions.
Anything else you want to add?
No, I can take question 4.
Okay, perfect.
How do I professionally address my company lack of racial diversity? I would say that the first thing I would do, let me say this personally, is I would get some data, right? Because I think there's a lot of good data out there now on how diverse boards and diverse teams and leadership all are generally outperforming non-diverse teams and boards. So, that's one thing that you can use to motivate your company to have a more diverse environment. I also think letting your senior leadership know that you're interested in it. This is something that's important to you. And I think if they learn about that employees in the company, this is something that's important to them, that may be motivating as well. So I would say definitely arm yourself with data, definitely let them know that you're really interested. And also I'd say, maybe if you have some articles or some webinars or other assets that you can bring to the table to help people in the company learn about it, then I think offering those kinds of resources would be helpful as well.
And then question 5, how can I effectively step up to support women of color, and how should I approach these conversations? I think this is where silence is not an option any longer. I think the way we do that is when people are not in the room, like in a meeting, to be an ally, to suggest that if there is something that's said that is racially biased, to stand up and say, not sure I agree with that, not sure it's appropriate here in the workplace. And I think that now people are going to be more open to it. I think that people understand that there is no place for racism at work, and that it really does begin with us. It begins with me. It means that I need to speak out and not be silent any longer.
And it's interesting because for most of us, I don't think everybody on this Zoom is a woman, but there are a lot of men who do this to support women in the workplace. You know how we get into a conversation with men and a woman says something is, overlooked, and then a man will step in and say, and go back to that comment just to make sure that a woman feels supported. It's the same thing. This whole idea is intersectional, right? Women, and then women of color. So I think as women, we should understand that a little bit more as well, and be able to do that.
Agreed. And then final question, do you have advice on finding your authentic voice? This was terrific when this question came in. Beth, Michelle, and I read this, and we had an engaging conversation about it, because what is an ally? We were getting at what is an ally, and is it okay to be a less vocal ally if that's most authentic to the people that we are? Michelle, do you want to answer this first, and then I'll.
Sure. I mean, how I approached it is, obviously we want as many vocal allies as we can have, but like on a political campaign, there's one person who's out front, who's really, talking about what they're willing to do and their whole proposition and position, right? But there are hundreds, sometimes thousands of volunteers behind them that prop them up, that do the voter registration, that research the campaign topics. There's lots of ways to be an ally, to be a support, just by educating yourself and making sure you're in a position to support this within your company. So I think there are places, and what we ultimately find even in political campaigns, right, is that the less vocal ones end up being the next candidates, right? Because they're now informed and ready to step up. So I do think it's fine, especially in the beginning. Take whatever feels natural to you, but definitely I would push you further to, know that at some point you will be that vocal ally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would confirm that, which is it's most critical that we're authentic to ourselves, because if we aren't, it's not going to be transparent, and it's not going to feel natural to those of us that we're on teams with or that we work with. Educating ourselves and doing what we feel is comfortable, but by educating ourselves with ideas and understanding and data, that allows us just to be an ally in and of itself.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is I'd say, even though you're a less vocal ally, that doesn't mean we're not telling you just to stay in a comfortable place.
Right.
No, in order to move forward, we all have to be a little bit uncomfortable. So if less vocal doesn't mean, you're not going to be uncomfortable.
Exactly. Okay, so as we're getting closer now to the breakout session, this is a provocation for all of us, and this is where we may feel a little bit uncomfortable, which is really part of the growth process itself, which is if we step back and when we have and how would that conversation shift if instead of thinking about racism as binary, meaning it's either or. And what do we really mean by that? That would be racist equals bad. Racist is someone that wears a white hat and is someone that goes down to Charlottesville, right? That was there at the UVA. But what if it is really about a continuum, that it's not a fixed position, meaning that it's not I am a racist or I'm not a racist, but if the question really is, how does racism affected our lives? How have we dealt with it? And so then the question that we would ask ourselves, which is, what am I doing now about it? Am I actively seeking to interrupt racism in this context? And then most importantly, how do I know if I'm either being effective or not effective? So that would be one area of not trying to think about racism as good or bad, but actually somewhat on a continuum. And then what if we thought about racism? One of the premises in White Fragility, which was really incredible and personally for me gave me a sense of pause, which is, what if racism is not necessarily fixed or not fixed, but it's systemic into our society, and that it's dictated by unconscious biases. So that in the book, the author talks about white progressives not being helpful in this idea of racism, because the idea is, well, I'm not racist. But again, that may not be the question. If we think that it's an unconscious bias that is systemic, then we can step back and perhaps have a different conversation. Michelle, anything else? on this?
Yeah, I would just say I think one of the premises in the book as well is that we all live in a racist society, right? Because it's a systemic. So it's not. So that's a fact. And if you start with that as a fact, then you don't have to worry about. You just have to move yourself forward from where you are, and understand the context in which you're in. So, it's not that racism is not here. That the fact that racism exists in society, that's a fact. So, it's about that's why we talked about it begins with me.
Right.
How do I move myself within this racist society forward and out of being complacent?
Right, because it's about the self-awareness.
Yeah.
That I don't know, I'm not the know-it-all, I'm kind of the learn-it-all. Like, what can I learn about this?
So we just wanted to go through some guidelines as you break out into your conversations. And we talked about how it begins with me, and I for me as well, for sure. As leaders, we just want to make sure that we are leading appropriately. And so the best thing we can do is educate ourselves. And I also don't want you to think, women of color, we're also people of color, we're also born into this racist society, and it has impacts on us in other ways as well. Not just in the terms of being a victim of racism, but in terms of how we view ourselves and what context we're in. So, there's a lot of vulnerability on our side as well. We're all here to be open-minded and explore. So thank you for your engagement. We all obviously here want to respect, listen, and learn. Definitely ask questions. And again, it's okay to feel uncomfortable. We're going to make mistakes, but we hope this is a brave space, a space for you to practice. So please use it as so, and ask the dumb questions that you want to ask, and let's all learn together.
Great. Okay. So what we'd ask everybody to do is take your phones out and just snap this, because for about 30 minutes, we'd ask you to introduce yourselves very quickly to get to know each other. And then think about, why does today feel differently? Why is it today versus any other time? Maybe explore and understand our own unconscious biases. How are we showing up, and what have we done or perhaps haven't we done? And equally important, how might these manifest themselves in the workplace? So I'm gonna create these breakout rooms. They're being done totally randomly. And then it's about 6 o'clock. So around 6:25, we'll start checking in, and then we'll bring everyone back, and we'll just have a little bit of a discussion of how that went. What did we learn? And think about also, what are you going to do differently tomorrow when you get back into your workspace from home, of course. So we have another 10 minutes or so. We wanted just some thoughts and impressions from the group. What did you think about your discussions? Anybody? What's up?
Show you.
Anybody?
Yeah, I mean, it's Mary Beth. I can just add that I thought it was good to bring the conversation back around and to talk a little bit about what everybody is seeing and feeling. We talked a little bit about the fact that we feel like this has been a little bit de-emphasized over the last few weeks. I mean, obviously it got a lot of attention, but unfortunately seems to have waned a little bit. So it was good to kind of talk about what everybody was seeing and feeling, and especially from different parts of the country too, and how things may differ, and people are having different experiences.
Thank you.
Well, and I was just going to say, I think my aha is that really at the end of the day, everyone wants to do the right thing. We all want to be, good people and understand things from others' perspectives, and that it rests with all of us to do the hard work, to call other people out, to look internally, and to ask for help. And so to me, that was kind of my aha.
Thanks, Julie. It's good. Aha.
I think building on Julie's point, we were talking about in our breakout session that sometimes you have what we labeled a hater in the group, somebody who's negative if you're in a party or a room where they want that negative attention. And I think it'd be helpful to what Julie just said, like, how do you call someone out without adding more flame, without adding more gasoline on that flame? How do you do that so you can have a constructive end result? What are those words? What are those actions? We were saying that we can say, okay, let's agree to not disagree. Like, it's important to stand up and say, I'm not in agreement. But how do you go further? What are those words that we can use, or those actions?
We were actually talking about this a little bit before we started tonight, because that was sort of the theme of some of the other questions that came in from the pre-event survey. And one thing that came up, and I think, Michelle, you may have mentioned it, was to create a safe space to have a conversation. Maybe not right now, but can we talk about this sometime?
Yeah.
I had never heard that, and as a skill, that was super helpful to me.
That's great.
Don't talk about that, Michelle, anymore, but.
That's great.
Yeah, no, I just know that these things are not one-time events. It's like Wendy said, it's a continuum. And if we're not going to be able to resolve everything right then and there. We want to, and we should attempt to, but if it doesn't, let's not get discouraged. We have to give it time. This whole thing has happened over 400 years. We can't expect that in 2020 it's going to be resolved and done. Give ourselves the space and time.
I think this conversation is helpful for me because I feel like I've had very few conversations about race outside of my bubble of like the people that I talk about everything. And here I was put into a room with, 5 other women that, I don't know. And we, we're having open conversations, very productive conversation, but it just took me outside of my comfort zone with people that I don't normally have the conversations with.
Yeah. It's good exercise for us.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say too that I think for my group, what I really appreciated the vulnerabilities and the honesty that so many in the group brought to the table, which is, and I think that part of that vulnerability comes from a place where they want to be helpful, they want to be allies, and they want to be supportive, but maybe just not sure. So I think that those type of conversations, I think, like Michelle said, it needs to continue, and this is a safe space for us to do that. So that was the one thing I took from the group, which was good.
I would say that in our group, we'd only touched on the workplace environment. We talked more from a personal life experience, but a couple of the takeaways, 3 different people said in 3 different ways, be part of the solution, seek out diversity, think about your environment and where you are and seek out the diversity because it may not come to you. And towards the difficult conversations, we actually had someone come in some years ago in the office and talk about different types of things you might encounter in the office. And one of the things they talked about are difficult conversations. And one of the things that I've taken with me over the years, I've done it with my husband, with my children, with friends, is when you have a difficult conversation or something difficult to say, don't get around the bush, just preface it and say, this is going to be a difficult conversation. And then say it, because that way the person knows that you're not just being very cavalier about this, that it is something you think is important, and you don't want to be misunderstood.
That's really good. That's
Well,
helpful.
also ways, there are definitely skills on having courageous conversations or what can be difficult conversations where you try to find some commonality. You really talk about how you feel, and then you really listen. So if you're going in, if you're having that kind of conversation, it's about not necessarily expecting what the outcome is, but maybe it's just to be heard. So I think it depends on what it is you really want to accomplish. So we are down, we have 2 minutes left.
What?
I know, it's 6:45. People can still stay on if they want to afterwards. But Michelle and I were talking, and Beth and I were talking as well, which is we really came in with no expectations of what our next session will be September 17th. So we're going to be open to you as to, do we have another conversation like this? Do we perhaps share some tools on exactly how to have the conversation? What we did here is, how do you go further? So maybe we dig deep a little bit into that, but we'll look to you guys on some feedback. So please fill out those surveys as to what you want. And then Michelle and I and Beth and Lisa and Terry will craft a program that's really geared towards your needs.
Great.
And with that, I want to thank you all for your honesty, for your vulnerability. Michelle being a great co-lead, love this partnership. For Terry and for Lisa, who really helped, and for Beth and her staff that really put this together. And I'll turn it over to Michelle for any closing thoughts as well.
I applaud each and every one of you, because this is hard, and the fact that you're here means you want to do the work, and that's the best thing you can do, is take the step forward. So thank you, and continue to educate me, because I'm learning as well.
Perfect.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Wendy.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Everyone, thanks,
you.
Michelle. Thank Wendy. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.